Good evening and welcome back to the Cambridge Community Forum. I'm Mike Starling and we're pleased to have City Manager Patrick Comiskey as tonight's special guest, coming off of this week's certification of the city election, which was held this past Saturday. This year, this election resulted in an over 300% increase in the number of votes cast. That's an impressive feat. And Patrick will tell us in detail about the behind-the-scenes procedures that safeguarded the ballots for everyone in this hybrid mail-in and in-person voting process. This happens to be our 16th Cambridge Community Conversation. I would like to thank the collaborating co-sponsors of the Cambridge Community Conversations, the Cambridge Association of Neighborhoods, the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce, and we'd be remiss if we didn't note that today happens to be Support Your Local Chamber of Commerce Day. So if you're not yet a member, check it out at dorchesterchamber.org. And also, of course, the Dorchester Star is one of our co-sponsors. I think a tip in the hat is in order here to Steve Rideout, who was the one who originally suggested the need for a forum like this to get COVID and other priority information out to the community during these turbulent times. So we here at WHCP were fortunate to have CAN, the Chamber, and the Dorchester Star join up as co-sponsors. A reminder that this broadcast will be repeated this coming Sunday at 1 o'clock right here on WHCP at 101.5 on your FM dial, as well as being simultaneously streamed and thus will be available on smart devices everywhere. So members of the audience, please feel free to ask your questions tonight in chat. So let's dig into today's broadcast. Patrick, thanks for joining us. And if I had to hazard a guess, was this your biggest project to oversee and execute since coming on board as the city's manager?
Mike, this was a big project, and it was a challenge that was one that was worthwhile, and we were able to, I think, take something that first we were worried about and actually turn it into a very positive outcome for the mayor and the city commissioners. They had decided to do this election ourselves. We went out to seek a vendor to help us with this. We put together a committee of judges and city staff and we also had a staff member from the county office to help us with this election, to put together the election. And it turned out to be quite a success, and huge success, to be frank. And we had a turnout of roughly 37.5% of our registered voters, which was really outstanding, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you run through the actions that you credit this high rate of participation this year?
Well, one of the things we did off the bat, Mike, was we advertised during the time period ahead of time, and during the time period in which we had an open process for people to sign up for the elections. You know, we had a 45-day qualifying period, which is a lot of communities typically cities will have a smaller period, 1 week, 2 weeks, but we had a 45-day period. We put ads in each of the newspapers that circulate Cambridge. We came on this show. We did some other promotions through media, traditional media, and we also advertised the election through social media like we haven't never before. And those things all created a dividend, in that we had 17 people came in to qualify to run for office. That was a number that longtime election volunteers told us that we've never had that kind of people sign up to run for office in Cambridge. And so that started the ball rolling on a real positive note. We continued to try to utilize social media and the local traditional media to help promote the election. We went on, we did a YouTube interview. We went to iPodcast. We tried to reach out anybody that we could, any media outlet that we could, to try to promote the election. And then, of course, the big one of all was, thanks to the support of the county government, their COVID committee, the county manager, the county health officer, the county finance director, and the emergency services director. That committee agreed to pay the cost, the difference between what we were looking at to pay for an election and the cost to do an all mail out ballot. So we sent a ballot out to all roughly 8,000 registered voters in Cambridge. We had a one-page information sheet explaining how the process was going to work, and that mail-out ballot was really the key to getting such a huge turnout. We had approximately 2,100 of the 2,983 votes that were counted. We had approximately 2,100 came in by the mail, and then we had over 800 people show up the day of the election, which really was so it was really a team effort. A lot of support from the media, from non-traditional media sources, from social media, and we had the benefit of I think a lot of different people who are helping us promote this election.
That's pretty awesome that it turned out so well. Is that an unusually high number for in-person voting as well?
We had, our anticipation was, because of COVID, we wanted to give people an opportunity to be able to mail in a ballot, because we knew a lot of people didn't want to come in and or go to any places, restaurants and shopping. All that's been adversely impacted. And so we knew that we expected we get a pretty high turnout from the mail-in, which we did. And then the on-site voting, we knew we probably would do about what we did the previous election, but we didn't realize that we were going to exceed that. The enthusiasm and the continual media support in promoting this election really helped out, and a lot of the social media, using all that social media helped to generate enthusiasm, and it brought a lot of people out. We tried to do as much as we could. One thing we did was, we tried to use social media to show people with a polling site. We walked them through it if people had an interest in seeing it. We had newspaper articles that were done by both of our main local newspapers that they were very supportive of it, and of course you and the radio station here and other non-traditional YouTube and other sites were very helpful in continuing the enthusiasm of getting people out.
Well, again, it's such an impressive result to get that many people out to the polls this year, virtually and through the mail. So were there recurring complaints or compliments that you heard about on the public voting venue?
We had, in general, one of the things that we'd hoped would happen by moving the voting site to Chesapeake College, being in the downtown, right in the heart of the community, that we would increase the participation from walk-in voters, and that turned out to be quite apparent. We had a lot of people who were able to walk to the polls, where traditionally, where we had it before, a lot of those voters would have had to get a ride. They were able to walk to the polls, and we had a lot of foot traffic that came on election day that were able to take advantage of the proximity to their residence.
Was there higher numbers of voters who would be close to downtown? With that in mind, I'm just wondering, would it be wards 2 and 3 that would have some foot traffic? Were those numbers up appreciably this year?
We had probably the biggest, as a comparison of voter participation. We had, I know we had, let me see, we were having the election was held in Ward 3, roughly almost in the center at the college is. And we had, let me see if I can give you kind of a number here. Let me see here if I can pull something up to give you a kind of a comparison. We had, let's see, in Ward 3, looks like we had, let's see, 100, 200. Looks like we had, let's see, 166 and 179. That's what, 2, 3, probably 3 1/4. We had roughly 345 people that participated from Ward 3 in the last election. And in this election, we had, let's see, roughly over 450 people participated. In Ward 2, we had we had 50 people participated in the last one. And this one, we had over 500 people that
Wow.
participated. So we increased
an
across
increase.
the board 3 times as many as we had in the last election. So different wards, I guess, probably had different percentages, but overall it was 3 times what we had participated in the last election.
Right. So overall, have you so far, I guess you're probably not finished reviewing the whole process with your election judges and volunteers, and is that learning more about the positives as well as any concerns that they experienced in running it all?
Yeah, we've had, of course, anytime you're doing something, you pick up some positives. We're hoping to do the same thing for the runoff. That'll be on the first Tuesday in December, which will be December 1st. Just to give you an example, we tried to have people move from one end of the building through the other so that people weren't going back and forth in the building, to reduce the chance for interaction with people, and hopefully reduce the chance for anybody with COVID from potentially passing it to somebody else. So far, none of our judges or staff that worked on the election had any symptoms. So I think we did a pretty good job of being able to safeguard. And once again, thanks to the county COVID committee that helped us to do things, or going to help us to pay for things we did on site to help prevent and protect our workers, our poll workers. One of the things we did was we had walkie-talkies, and if somebody came in who was handicapped, and we could try to stop the line at the beginning and be able to send people back through so they had a shorter travel distance to get back out to their car. We tried to, our walkie-talkies, we've learned we're going to have additional walkie-talkies because the charge wasn't lasting the 12 hours of the election night. And there's some other little knick-knack things, but in general, I think we found that obviously the voters found the site accessible, and they were able to participate. And of course, we gave them the mail-in option, which how much more participation can you have? And you didn't have to fill out an application. We sent you the ballot directly to you, and you had 2 blocks to fill in, put it back in the envelope, sign it before you put it in, and send it to us. So I think everything went we had mostly positive feedback.
Did you get much in the way of feedback from the candidates themselves? Any suggestions from them on what could have worked better, or any compliments where they said, I like this process, it worked well?
We had varying feedback from candidates. I think it's one of those things where, of course, there's always a thought that something could be done better. Some candidates didn't like the mail-in process. They were telling people to come in person and not to do the mail-in. We were encouraging mail-in because of the COVID, and also because we knew the more ballots we get up front, that means the more chance that they won't forget on election day to come in or have something detain them, or they can't come to election day. So that was another reason that we wanted to have more people mail it in.
Will you be doing an overall final report for the city council about the new procedures and how well it worked?
Well, we've been giving feedback to councilmen and also to candidates. As we've gone along, we've tried to keep everybody updated on what we're doing. And of course, all the voters were sent information, a 1-page information sheet along with their ballot. So we've tried to keep people updated as we've gone along. We've tried to put things on our Facebook page so that voters would be, and candidates, and of course, councilmen. Every time we got information, we tried to forward it to the candidates as well as council members and the judges, and information to get everybody as educated as we could anytime, we could.
So how much did this one actually cost, and how does that compare to past elections? I'm assuming it was somewhat more expensive since it wasn't run concurrent with the county's administration of elections, and there was a lot of mailing going on this time that must have had some cost to it.
Yes, Mike, we had, just to give you an idea, a year ago, September, I'm looking at a memo, September 4th, that we had from Gwen at the County Board of Elections office. One of the options we asked them to do was, well, first of all, she told me that it cost us, the city, in 2016, $16,704 to do an election. And we were looking this time at spending approximately $15,000 with our vendor, and with costs associated with the variable costs with the election. Plus we estimated that we were going to have a staff person that was going to help us part-time answer what we had when we set up that hotline number to help us with calls there too. But we also asked them to consider the mail-in ballot back a year ago. And Gwen suggested it was probably going to be, with postage and everything, it would exceed $30,000. We asked last summer for our vendor to give us a price for doing the mail-out ballots. And we provided to council back in July his proposal cost, which we estimated would probably be an additional roughly between his cost and the variable costs such as postage. We'd be looking at $25,000 in addition to the $15,000. So we're looking at probably $35,000 to $40,000 to run one of these for each one of these that we do. And we're fortunate that we're going to be able to get roughly the $25,000 back from the COVID committee to cover that additional cost. We're going to pay what we had planned, and we'll be able to show that COVID committee what our contract was originally and what we ended up paying beyond that because of those 8,000 ballots we mailed out.
Well, that's great. So that'll be essentially cost neutral as far as past campaigns out of the city's treasury, right?
That's one of that was one of the advantages, I guess, with the COVID assistance that they were going to be able to give us. Then it allowed us to do this and not wouldn't add any more costs. And we had budgeted $50,000 planning on a runoff. You got to plan for a runoff. At that time, we didn't realize we were going to have 17 candidates, but we had to, with this extra 50 to 55,000 is what we told the COVID committee to anticipate for us to be able to do the all mail out ballot and also have some money to set up for protection of our workers and to do protections for the voters on election day.
So with these changes, what's been the revision and the role for the Board of Elections itself? What did they do in this particular process, and how's that different from what they've had to do in the past?
Well, of course, they were helpful in a couple ways. First, Mike, they provided us, we rely on them to provide us the voter roll of the registered voters. And so what we did is we got a list from them when it came time for us to do a mail out. We had, our rules said that anyone who wanted to participate had to be registered 20 days prior to the election. So the 28th of September was our last day to register, but we had to get ballots out to people earlier. So we took the existing list in the middle of September and we used that list to mail out ballots. And then later we went back and got an updated list from the county so we knew that who else needed to have ballots and we could expect as additions. Also, anyone that they took off the rolls. So we knew that if somebody for some reason was taken off the rolls, that we wouldn't count a ballot that might come in from that person in the mail out or on election day. Also, the county board provided us a staff person that met with us from January through roughly the time that they had to pull that person back for the primaries, the national primary elections in Maryland. And that person was instrumental in helping us get information and communicating and giving us ideas and helped us, review questions with the vendor that we chose. And so that was helpful. And we've been communicating with them to update. For instance, today we talked about any way we can try to, any changes in the voter population that we can change for the next election to make sure we don't send ballots out to people who are deceased or who have stepped off.
So I understand this past Monday was the actual certification of the results, and there was a couple of very close races. I think it was at Ward 4 that was decided by 13 votes, and in Ward 3 might have been a runoff candidate who narrowly didn't make the runoff by just a couple of votes. Are any of these in the category of too close to call? Is there anything outstanding, or do these look like the indeed final certified results?
Mike, we certified the results on Monday. The judges and myself did. One of the things it did show is that it's particularly in the Ward 3 race, that if your vote can make the difference, you and your spouse's vote could decide an election for a city commission seat. So it's important that you take the time, because in these particularly city commission races, they can make the difference. We had between candidate 2 and 3 in Ward 3, we had a separation of 2 votes. On Monday, we looked at 32 ballots that we had in the contested or provisional category, and we went ahead and looked at those, and the judges decided that 8 of the votes would be counted. And when we opened those up, it basically, each of those candidates got 1 extra vote, so it still remained a 2-person difference. And so that ended up deciding the election result was that what we had for Monday. In the other race, we had the 14, or roughly, I think 14. We offered, as a means of trying to be transparent in our election, we've tried to do several things. We've tried to, when we did a video on election day to show voters how the process worked at the post office. We had the postmaster for Cambridge. He came out and showed us how they kept the ballots. One of the things with the election is that, we send everybody about directly to their house. So no city worker ever felt a ballot or touched a ballot. When the ballots went to the post office, we had provided them boxes that had a lock on the back and that had an open flap that people could put their ballot in. The people at the post office, when they received a person's ballot, they slid it in this slot. We had 2 big boxes that were bigger than this that they were using primarily, but this is basically the same concept, but this is a smaller box we gave them if they needed it. They at the post office closed this, locked it, and put a lock on it before they brought it out to us. So it was locked the whole time that we had it until it was brought back to the polling site. The post office, we put a video that we showed on our Facebook page where the Postal Service explained how they kept them secure. Then we showed how they were delivered. People got to watch that process on social media. With the candidates, the 4 candidates that were in tight races, we invited each of them to come on Monday, and we offered to them an opportunity for True Ballot. We put them on the overhead screen, and we offered an opportunity for them to see every single ballot, because True Ballot scanned every ballot. And so they could, if they wanted to, they could have him flip through every single ballot, and they could look at those and sit there with a pencil and tabulate them themselves. And if they saw one that looked funny, where a guy looked like he checked 2 boxes, they could say, hey, hold on, go back to that one. Let's talk about that one. And we offered that opportunity, and none of the candidates took us up on it, but we wanted to be wanting to be as transparent as we can. We gave that opportunity to the candidates to try to make sure that we were being as open and give them an opportunity to see and be as, any questions they have be answered.
Well, that sounds really remarkably transparent, and hats off to you and True Ballot for being able to have a process like that where it could all be reviewed by anybody that had a concern on what happened. Now, early on, I remember that there was a controversy about some underage voters getting ballots sent to them. Am I remembering that correctly? What happened there, and how did that get resolved?
You're correct, Mike. They one of the things in Maryland that they've tried to do to increase voter registration is when you get your driver's license renewed, they ask you, hey, we want to update your registration. So they try to get people to get registered at the same time. Since everybody who has a car has a driver's license, it gets everybody, almost puts you in a situation where how can you not get registered? So even 16 and 17-year-olds who get a driver's license, they will go ahead and when they get their first license, they try to get them registered to get them in the system. So what happened is so those people are in the rolls that the county keeps. Now, normally on election day, you'll walk to the polls, and then the county asks you how old are, they'll look at your age and they will say, okay, if you're under 18, you're not eligible to vote. But we're doing a system now where we're doing something that's not usual. We're doing all mail out ballot. So when they gave us the rolls to our vendor, they didn't think about the fact that they've got those 16 and 17-year-olds. And then people started getting them on Saturday and Sunday. And then, of course, we found out both of us were getting calls, the county and our office, on Monday morning. So we were able to, once the county identified those people, they were updated in the final list. So if any of them tried to send in a ballot, it wouldn't have counted because it would have been kicked out by True Ballot's computer system.
Okay. Well, speaking of True Ballot, we've got a question here that's coming in from the audience from Suzanne Drescher. She's asking about the hiring procedure and the vetting process for picking a True Ballot? Was that open to competitive bidding?
It was. What we did, Mike, was first in last fall, we started trying to identify our options. When we understood that we weren't going to be on the county's presidential ballot for our city election, the city mayor and commissioners asked us to look out and see if we could find out what our other options are. And we identified a couple companies that could do various processes for us. And we sent out, and before around Christmas time, we put a ad out with in the newspaper. We also put an ad out, I think on our Facebook page. We put an ad, I think, in the Maryland Municipal League site. We're trying to see if we could get any information. We already had 3 vendors that we knew about that did some parts of that process, and we sent out and requested them to send in proposals. And we met with True Ballot because in January, the judges, the 3 judges, myself, a member of the county election office, and we had our city assistant attorney, and we went ahead and we sat down and we reviewed. We met with them at Chesapeake College, and basically they showed us their process, a little better presentation because it was in person, but they showed the same process to the mayor and council last summer when we officially hired them. But the committee was very impressed with what they did. This company does elections all over the country. They do unions. They've done Indian tribes as well as cities. We had a staff member contact. I can't remember the total number, but it was a significant number of places that they had done elections before, other cities. And we went ahead and we found out that they were experts in the process. The gentleman who oversaw this one, he himself he said over 1,000 elections in over a process of 2 decades. So we felt we had a very good vendor, and I think it turned out that we were very pleased with the result.
Well, it sounds like that much experience really paid off. Here's another question from the community. Judy Prawl is asking, I guess, what's the parameters that turns into a runoff? Is it you tell me if I've got it right. No one's over 50%?
Correct, Mike. It's 50% plus 1. So if you had, if there's 301 people voted, you needed 151 votes to be elected. We had a couple race. We had one race for one ward that had 3 candidates on Saturday that had the candidate received over 50% of the vote, so that candidate was automatically elected. The race for mayor, the race for Ward 2 and Ward 3, there were 3 or 4 candidates in that race, and those races, no one achieved the majority. And so what will happen is we will be having a runoff on December 1st, the first Tuesday in December, and it will entail the top 2 vote getters in the election for mayor. The top 2 for Ward 2 and the top 2 for Ward 3 will be on the ballot. And so every voter is going to get another ballot. If we do another mail out like we're planning, every voter will get a ballot like the last time, because they'll all be voting for the runoff for the mayor election.
Let's take a moment here to hear from one of your new bosses. Here's Chad Malkus congratulating you for running such a good process.
I appreciate that. There's one of your feedbacks for one of the candidates.
Exactly right. If I'm correct, he was the only candidate to get 100% of his ward voting for him, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, let me see.
Was there a write-in for Donald Duck?
No, technically, yes. He got 100%. That's sometimes. Usually, you'll have like 2 people may not vote who are in that ward, possibly, but I don't see that from our return. Looks like he got all of them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations to him and you. All right, let's go back to our other prepared questions. If someone suspects that there was someone recently deceased or that they'd moved away and a ballot was cast improperly, how would they register a complaint to be investigated?
They can, Mike, what they can do is they can contact our office. If they know of that, please do. In fact, on Monday, we had one of the candidates bring forward 2 names to us, and we asked John at True Ballot when he was on the overhead screen to check to see if we had votes from those individuals. He said that no ballot was cast for those two, but he did have where he identified, it looked like one of them had came in, but we didn't accept it. But we will try to pull that one out. We're going to try to go through and see if we can't pull that out and take a look at it. I talked today with staff over at the county election office about that. Now their rolls are closed, but what we're going to try to do is get any information until they have of any deceased people from the 28th. I think we got the roll from the 28th. Anyone from that point to the present that we can get, that we can remove from our ballot list, that we won't send them a ballot. We had 40, I think approximately 41 that we sent out that we had a return to sender. So we know those are individuals that should be, aren't going to be on our list. So any deceased information, we're happy to get it, because obviously we don't want to send it to somebody who's passed away. Just for the purpose of, one is because of the there's no one there to vote, but also two, they may have a spouse at home, and last thing we want to do is a grieving spouse to send a letter with their spouse who just recently was deceased, with something in the mail with their name on it.
Right. Now, were any ballots received after the election day, and could they be counted or not?
No, what we had advised the public, Mike, was that we advised them that if you, in the letter that we sent, that mail your ballot in no later than 1 week prior to election day to ensure that we get it. So we tried to advertise on social media on a Tuesday. If you haven't already sent it in, please hold your ballot, bring it in, or just vote in person. We had a number of people who brought their ballot in on election day. And what we did was, you could bring in your ballot, but you can't bring in somebody else's ballot. And when you brought in your ballot, we had them check in, and then we scanned their envelope to make sure that was indeed their ballot. So that was a safeguard that we had. We had so far, when I went by the county office, let me just back up a second. On Saturday, the day of the election, one of the county staff members was good enough Saturday afternoon, late in the afternoon, she brought over to us, I think 2 or 3 ballots that they found in that box next to the courthouse on Saturday. They check it, I think, daily, and they pulled a couple out that were ours. They brought them over to us. I think we had roughly 17 that came from that box. The judges looked at that election night, decided to count all those ballots that came in the county box. Since they checked it on Saturday, they've had 2 more that were put in as of, I guess, yesterday, because they gave those 2 ballots to me today. We know that there's going to be some that were mailed in late. I'm going by the post office on Friday to pick up any that were, that came in beyond the deadline.
But those will not get counted, it sounds like, if they weren't in as of Saturday evening at 7. Is that the way it worked?
That's correct. And we had some people come in to vote, and they weren't on our registration list. And unfortunately, the way our rules work is that you have to be registered 20 days in advance. And we had that was a Sunday for us, so we allowed people to register up to 19 days. So anyone was going to participate had to be registered by the 28th of September. And that'll be the case with the runoff on December 1st, the first Tuesday in December. They will have to have been registered by the 22nd of September. They won't be able to register now. I'm sorry, the 28th of September. They will not be, if they weren't on our list for the general election, they won't be eligible to now come on the list to vote in the additional runoff election.
So if I just moved into the city, I'm going to have to wait till next time. It sounds like I can't get a provisional ballot or be certified that I've got a new operable address here in town. Is that right?
That's correct, Mike.
Okay. Now, you didn't have a ballot box at City Hall, right? And obviously, there was a little bit of concern with a handful of folks. What'd you say, 17 altogether, placing ballots into the county box over by the county building. What were your concerns about having a ballot box at the city, and are you going to look at that for next time?
Mike, one of the things we wanted to do as a safeguard as we got together over the fall and the winter, we were listening to issues from previous elections. And one of the things we were real concerned with was to make sure that we did everything we can to ensure the public that their votes were counted and that there weren't any ballots put into our system that were not credible or that might have been potential voter fraud. And so and of course the impression for the public, we wanted to have the ballots where at no time did a city official, did a city worker, did they have the opportunity to touch a ballot that came in. All of the ballots that were generated by the vendor out in Bethesda or Timonium, wherever his printer was, and they were sent directly to the voter. The voter then gave it to the U.S. Postal Service by their mailbox or dropping it off at our local post office. And it was then in the hands of the U.S. Postal Service in these secure boxes until Election Day, where it was then transferred over to Chesapeake College. So we wanted voters to not think in any way could somebody have tampered locally with the ballots. Another thing that we were looking at is you've got voter fraud, which may be a misdemeanor or maybe a little harder to regulate. But when you put a ballot in if you put a fraudulent ballot into the post office, then you're risking being accused of mail fraud in addition to voter fraud. And we know that the penalties of mail fraud are dramatically increased. And that was a safeguard that we were hoping to have as one of our safeguards to make voters feel that confidence in how their ballots were being held and counted for.
Okay. I'm just looking here at some of the comments coming in from the field, but I think it looks like most of these you've already answered. So with this being the first time that the election was run by a third party private company, what sort of unexpected things happened? Any lessons learned that you want to keep in mind if we wind up using this procedure in the future?
I think that probably the thing that, one of the features that we had in the election was we wanted to give people options because he was able to do that for us. It wasn't as rigid as a traditional election. And because he was able to allow people, if you changed your mind, you could come down on Election Day and vote, and it would replace your prior vote. We had because of all the forums, I forgot to thank the League of Women Voters, who also did a couple forums early on, and the Chamber of Commerce, who sent out their questionnaires. We had a couple other agencies that did the same to generate. I think the FOP sent a thing out to people, to candidates to get opinions. That kind of stuff brought in more questions. Shay Speaks was one that another forum, and we had, as a result, this helped us get a lot more information out there. And that was one of the things that we had 3 people I know that called our hotline. We had our election hotline that we offered citizens a chance to call in, and they could, I think this was our hotline that we sent out an information, and we tried to, we had it on the ballot information too, but we tried to, we had 3 people call in saying, hey, I've heard some more of these forums and I want to see if I can get another ballot. And so was one of the features that we liked. And I think we probably would like to use that again as a feature. Of course, the new commission that comes in, that's one of the decisions they're going to have to make early on. Most of the things that I think we learned were more minor things that we might be able to improve. Of course, COVID was an overriding factor for safety. We would have liked to have had people come into Chesapeake College both ways and be able to go out both ways. But because of COVID, we were trying to bring everybody in one way, let so many people in at a time, and then have them move through and get out the outdoor. So that would be an opportunity if COVID hopefully is not going to be a problem in 4 years from now. But I think that that'll be something the new commission will have to decide. Do we want to go with a third party like we did this time? And it gives us some flexibilities. If we go with the state ballot, we'll be at the very bottom of the ballot along with everything else. And we will be following basically whatever the state decides to do. If the state was going to do an all mail out ballot, then that's what citizens would get. But if they don't decide to do it, that option probably won't be available. If the city does it again, then we have the flexibility to do some of those things as long as we're willing to pay the extra cost to do those.
Okay. It looks like one of the comments that we've got here is from Robert Larimer, and he was saying, and I think this is consistent with what you were telling us a little bit ago, that some people have brought in their spouse's ballots, and you weren't allowed to turn in your spouse's ballot. Is that what you were saying, that yes, you could not turn in anyone else's?
That's correct, Mike. And Robert's correct. We had, what we did is we tried to get people at the door, and they came in, hey, can you go get your spouse and bring them down? We had one person, one couple, the spouse had a hip surgery and had a crutch. And what we did is that person came to the door. We went ahead and we talked to them. We gave them a little form to sign that their husband could walk it from the outdoor into and drop it in. We had a woman who had her daughter at college that I spent a good bit of time, just a few minutes, I guess, outside explaining why we felt that we could not accept a second person's ballot, because we were more concerned with the integrity of ballots that were out there that maybe somebody got their hands on because a person was deceased, or somebody had moved into a place that a former registered voter was there and they got a ballot and tried to fill it out and bring it in and drop it off along with their own. We were more concerned with trying to maintain the security of the election and security of making everybody feel that their ballot was counted. And so that's why we try to have those safeguards.
I could see that if you had a category of exceptions and it became known, then anyone could come in and say, hey, this is my spouse's ballot and she's not feeling good today. She wanted me to drop it off. And you might not necessarily know if that's true or not, because once it gets dropped in, it's gone and it gets tabulated out of that sealed envelope, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Lynette Longus asked the question about were the ballots, I think you answered this, that all of the ballots that wound up in the county box were indeed counted. Looks like she thought none of them were counted. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yes, Mike. There was now initially, I told folks that our instructions were that they had to be sent through the U.S. Postal Service, or they had to be dropped off by the person whose ballot it was at the election site. But we still took those ballots, including 2 that were dropped off at City Hall. And we had those put in envelopes that were sealed by the people who got them. And we had the judges review them on election night. And we decided that the ones that went to the county office, that the judges decided that we would accept those. If we had said, oh, we're going to go ahead and count them, my concern would have been we'd had a lot of ballots dropped in there, possibly people turning ballots in because they didn't want to take the risk of putting it in the mail service if it wasn't their ballot. And we had 2 that were dropped off at City Hall. We specifically said in the instructions, any ballots dropped at City Hall would not be counted. And the judge decided not to count those 2 ballots. Now, having said that, we also told people, if you made the mistake of doing either one, you could call the hotline and get a replacement ballot, or you could come to the election site and you could vote in person and your ballot would be counted.
Yeah, that's a really unique feature, it sounds like, where if you changed your mind or you had a mistake like that, you put it in the wrong place and it's not going to be counted, that you could come in and vote in person or get a replacement ballot ahead of the deadline and basically send in a corrected vote, and it would be counted. So that's really smart. It strikes me that shows you there's excellent tracking of those barcodes for who's, and they can make sure that everything's on the up and up. Now, let's talk about the runoff election on Tuesday, December the 1st. Any concerns about Tuesday being a work day that might limit participation?
Well, Mike, you might remember a year ago when the mayor and council were discussing what days to hold the election, originally our charter said election day being the same as the federal. And of course, the meeting, the mayor and commissioners decided to try to have the date moved up a couple weeks to try to not interfere and create confusion. And then the thought was, how do we do the runoff? And the idea was to do it early in December after Thanksgiving. And the concern was, the discussion was Saturday versus weekday. And the commissioners decided, let's try it on a Saturday in October, because we thought that might be able to give people more participation. There were some that were worried that people would be more likely to vote on a work day and not give up part of their Saturday to come in and vote. We don't know, but we do know we had a higher turnout on site than we did the previous election. Having it on a work day or traditional, I guess, voter day, we'll find that out. And we thought that Saturdays during the holidays would be even worse because of Christmas and family gatherings. So we thought that having it on a work day would be a better day to potentially get voters in. And of course, we're looking at the mail-in ballots to be more popular, I think, this time because of the holidays, and also because people will, I think they'll feel more comfortable with it if they weren't already comfortable.
So speaking of those mail-in ballots, when are those guys going to go out for that December 1st runoff?
I've talked with some of our judges about that, and we're thinking that probably we would try to do that on maybe send them out either on the federal election day so that people would get them 2 days or 3 days after the election day. We don't want to send them out before the presidential election, because we know that everybody's going to be honed in on that election. And so we're going to try to send it out shortly after that, so that it'll be a couple days separation. And then that way they'll be hopefully honed in on the city election, and we can start really hitting people, because we know they're going to be hit heavy on this presidential election. And we want to try to take it right after that as soon as we can, to get, people into the system. And of course, this time, the one advantage is that our ballot system will be ready to hopefully go. So it takes us roughly 1 week. Once we tell the vendor go, it takes us roughly 1 week to get those printed to the printer in the mail. So we'll hopefully be giving them the word before Election Day, so they'll be ready to go mail it out on Election Day.
Well, you mentioned some of the advertising and publicity that took place. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that for the runoff election, it looks like there will be a League of Women Voters Candidates Forum for all of those in those 2 wards, as well as the mayoral runoff. And it looks like that's going to be scheduled on Wednesday, November the 18th. So there'll still be a couple of weeks ahead of the actual voting there. So we'll just mention that for what it's worth. Were there any write-in votes in this election?
Mike, our system does not allow for write-in votes. You have to qualify, come in and fill out the paperwork in order to be on the ballot. We don't have a space or an option for a write-in. Okay. Also, just to let you know, talking about the for the mayoral race, Channel 47 is also wanting to talk and interview the 2 mayoral candidates for that race too. So that should help give some more publicity as well.
Right. Good. So with the December the 1st runoff, do you think it'll be easier to run than the October 17th was, having one under the belt? Why or why not? Or do you think it'll be pretty much the same?
I think we'll probably be pretty much the same. One advantage is that, of course, we will have everybody will have worked together for already the experience of one election. This time, if we don't have Bob, who is the main guy for True Ballot, we will have possibly John himself may be there. He'll be there at the counting time. We're probably going to try to have more people to help us do the opening of the ballots and the counting. That'll be one thing we're going to try to do so we can get done sooner. But because we're looking at a mayoral race, we're hoping to have as many ballots cast as we did the last time. Which
was a bunch.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in planning for the next time for the city elections, do you like the idea of having the county do it? Would you try to urge it in that direction and just get in sync with them calendar-wise in advance? Or is this such a good result to this process that everyone should think about maybe we replicate this one?
Now, Mike, one of the things that Cambridge has in their city charter, they have that the city manager is the person who serves as supervisor of elections. So from my own perspective, of course, it was kind of an interesting project just a year ago to be kind of in a situation we had to put this together. And of course, naturally, it would be taking work off of me to have the county do the election. But on the other hand, it'll be up to the mayor and the commissioners. There are a lot. I think we found that there are advantages to us doing it ourselves. We can have the flexibilities in doing things that the county office would have to be. Those might be dictated by the state. Like if this time they decided to do sending everybody a request for a ballot before they could get a ballot, that they don't have the flexibility that we were able to have because we were able to do our own system. And so there are advantages, and we may have found that we can get those flexibilities give the city a chance to have more participation if we do it ourselves. But the new commissioners will be the ones who will decide that in the spring. We'll probably be talking about that early on because it takes about 3 good years, at least 3 years out. We need to make a decision because the state requires us a good 3, basically 2.5 to 3. We have to have everything done, meaning charter changes and everything else, which we have to be starting 3 years, no later than 3 years from the next election, if we want to try to get on the state ballot. And no one has gone through this process because we looked at that last fall too. And I found that Ocean City was the only city that's tried to get on the state ballot, and they ended up backing out. And when I talked to people at Ocean City, they like the idea of having the flexibility that and not being at the very bottom of the ballot. But they had the advantage that they have one polling site, where for us, we have multiple polling sites on county election day, where they had one polling site, so they could set the city election up in the same building. Now that'll be something that we'll probably be discussing, early on in the next calendar year.
Well, speaking of polling sites, I know early on there was a suggestion to use Governor's Hall at one point. How did it turn out working with Chesapeake College and using their facility?
Well, I think we had used Salewinds, and one of the reasons was because the city had the use of the building. There wasn't a charge. This time we were looking at paying over $12,000 to use the facility, so we looked at alternate options. The Chesapeake College staff offered to let us use the college for no fee. It moved the election site into the heart of town and made it more accessible to walk-in voters. And I think we found that turned out to be a part of the success of the higher turnout was because more people could walk to the polls. So they didn't have to have a car. And of course, the college staff was so accommodating. One thing that I heard from one of the staff members of the college that I thought was interesting, Mike, that viewers, he's grown up here, and he told me, he said, Pat, one of the things that I've seen today is this was Cambridge walking through the door. I've seen all walks of life coming through the door today. This was a cross section of people coming in, and this really was a true representation of the city coming in today.
Well, that's really nice to hear. Now, with the possible exception of Ward 2, it looks like the new council is going to be first timers. Are there a host of things that they'll need to be briefed on? Ethics restraints, closed versus open meetings, number of people that can be together outside of a council meeting, things like that, et cetera?
Yes, Mike, what we'll probably want to do is we'll probably want to have some orientation sessions on some of those things. We'll probably have a session on open meeting rules. We will have a session on also on just some overall rules, and we'll have our city attorneys to help be involved in that. We'll try to see if there's any information from the MML that they might be able to help us do over the internet virtual meeting with them to go over some of those things, and we'll try to do those sometime in between the next runoff and Christmas, if we can set some of those up so people can start getting some of that information. And that's something that we'll try to do, during the month of December. I know one of the things that the mayor's already recommended that we get some information on training for economic development. We're going to try to order some material on that to give them another overview on that. So we're going to try to put together some training sessions, and and open meetings and rules and public financing rules. Those kind of things are things we'll want to make sure that they become aware of.
Well, Patrick, I just took a quick look over at the comments, and I see a few there, but they look like they're very specific issues for the most part, and several things that actually you touched on earlier in the hour. So I think what I'd like to ask you is, how do people get in touch with you with suggestions or any issues that need to be followed up on about this elections process?
They can, Mike, they could email me at City Hall, or they can call us. And we also have that hotline that they can call as well if they have some questions, if they wanted to talk to one of our staff members and give some suggestions. You know, we had this, our hotline is also on our Facebook and our website. It's 410-228-8970. And they could call that number as well at City Hall. This was our hotline number, and voters can call that number, or they can they can call and ask for myself too, or email us.
Was that 410-228-8970? Did I read that correctly?
That was correct. I'll go ahead.
228-8970. Okay, there's your election hotline for anything for Patrick to follow up on. Any closing thoughts there, Patrick?
Mike, I just wanted to say that, you know, I was really appreciative of all the different people who were supportive of this election. You know, the mayor and council putting aside the resources. I can't thank enough our county manager and our county health officer and finance director and our county emergency management director, who found it appropriate to offer to provide us up to $55,000 to help cover the additional costs that weren't budgeted to account for this election, because that made it possible, and we wouldn't have had the kind of turnout. Also, the League of Women Voters, yourself and your show, the two our local newspapers who ran very positive articles, I think, overall, that helped promote the election, and then YouTube with Shay Speaks, and Ms. Wongus, who also helped promote the election through her social networks, and also our city Facebook director. She did a great job of keeping this thing on the front of our city Facebook page. We have over 13,300 people following our city Facebook page now. So it becomes a very good source for us to get information out to people.
Well, that's really impressive, and hats off to everybody for the way they pulled together and publicized this all across the community. So,
and also, Mike, I'd like to also thank particularly our judges, you know, Jerry Burrows, Portia Ennels, Michael Wheatley. We had Adrian Holmes. We also had two assistant judges that weren't able to be there because of COVID-related issues, and Barbara Brooks. She's going to be helping us out in the next election. Unfortunately, she was in quarantine. So, and we had our city staff, Larry Seeberger, who's been helping us throughout the process, as our key point person. Also, Tyler Walker, Dale Price, and Rosalind, who works with me, has spent a lot of time on this election, helping make it a successful election.
well, indeed it was, and congratulations again, and our thanks to you for being our guest tonight on the Cambridge Community Conversation, and for being so accessible and transparent and talking about the city election process that's just been completed. Hats off to the whole team for achieving more than triple the usual voting turnout.
Yeah.
A reminder that this broadcast will be repeated this coming Sunday at 1 p.m. right here on 101.5 WHCP Radio, and as well as going to be simultaneously streamed, of course, on the web, so thus it's available on smart devices everywhere. And I'd be remiss if I failed to mention that today is National Support Your Local Chamber Day. Our great chamber has a great webpage, dorchesterchamber.org. So check it out. You can join up there if you're not already a member. And I would be doubly remiss if I didn't remind you that this month is the one time each year that WHCP comes to you and asks for your support to keep this unique nonprofit community radio station on the air. Memberships start at just $25, and you will receive the famous just printed Cambridge Community Radio Calendar. So here it is. It's just come in hot off the presses. Great job done by lots of local photographers. So go online to whcp.org and show your support for Cambridge Community Radio. With that, our thanks again also to the Cambridge Association of Neighborhoods, the Dorchester Star. These folks worked tirelessly behind the scenes along with the chamber to make these Cambridge community conversations possible. We'll be taking a break during the final window of the presidential election, but we will be back on Wednesday, November the 11th with a very special Veterans Day program hosted by Mike Detmer. So stay tuned. I'm Mike Starling saying until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.